Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths. I'm your host, Jennifer Zeng. It's so nice to see you again after some interruption because I needed to change studios. Today I will talk about some black swan events in China. Then I will discuss a very important question. Why has the US won all the wars but lost all the battles? Why can an article by a former Australian Prime Minister serve as evidence of the CCP's threat to the world? Before we go on, I'd like to first of all express my gratitude to everyone who has supported me in any form. I'd like to first of all show you this message I received together with a $100 donation. Say the message, inconvenient or not, truth must be told. 加油. The last two words, 加油, are actually the pronunciations of two Chinese words meaning keep fighting, go, or keep it up. I must say that I'm very much moved. You know, YouTube has been suppressing me very obviously since January this year. My views suddenly dropped by over 90%, and my videos were often given a yellow flag, which means I wouldn't have any advertisement revenue. A major reason why I had to change studios is to save cost. Renting a studio has a cost, as there were two technicians working together with me every time when I did live shows, apart from the cost of the studio itself. So I'm now doing everything on my own from my home with a virtual background. I will try to keep going as far as I can. So any kind of support is much appreciated. Now, let's move to our first topic today. We all know that the term black swan is often used to refer to an unpredictable event that is beyond what is normally expected of a situation and had potentially severe consequences. Well, on September 5th, a real black swan landed in Tiananmen Square out of nowhere. Let's watch a video. Well, this swan appeared right after the national flag raising ceremony. Soon afterwards, it started raining. I must say that it was very unusual thing. I had lived in Beijing for 17 years, but I had never seen a black swan or any kind of swan in Beijing. I only saw birds or animals in the zoo in such a densely populated city. Any animals would usually be scared to death, just as some foreigners who were overwhelmed by the crowds and crazy traffic. The problem was nobody cared for traffic rules. People did all sorts of unexpected things. I remember a student from the US said to me after I drove her to the Great Wall that she admired me. No, she worshipped me so much for daring to drive in such a crazy situation in such a crazy city. Anyway, this one was caught later. It was said that since there was no footprint on this swan, it must be a wild animal. So this unusual event has been spreading on the internet like mad. So many people have been talking about it. For those who oppose the CCP, they think that this is an indication that the CCP will encounter big trouble. For the CCP itself, it actually also fears that this means bad luck for them. Chinese people tend to believe that heaven, earth, and human beings are interconnected with one another. So something happening in the human world may really reflect heaven's will. At least many people hope that the CCP will be gone as soon as possible. Now, Let's move to another possible black swan event in China. Will the CCP encounter big trouble soon? Let's watch a short video. I'll try to share it from my screen. Hopefully it will work. Well, this video shows a group of employees from Evergrande, the largest real estate developer in China, shouting vicious Evergrande, brutally laying off employees, refusing to pay employees commissions. The banner they are holding says the same thing. Actually, I did a show about Evergrande last September, about 1 year ago. I kind of predicted what would happen now. Let me show you the article or the show I did last year about Evergrande. So this is what I did last year. Evergrande, to save or not to save, is China's financial crisis coming? So at that time, Evergrande encountered huge problems in terms of its capital flow. It had to blackmail the local government for it to bail it out. And the local government virtually forced its creditors to turn their loans to Evergrande into so-called investment or shares of Evergrande, so that Evergrande didn't have to pay back those debts. It seems that Evergrande's problem wasn't solved through that round of bailout. Recently, some of its projects have been stopped, and it is laying off employees like we just saw in the video. And for the first time ever, Evergrande has admitted that it could default on its debts. International rating agency Moody's has also downgraded Evergrande and its subsidiaries again on September 7th. This is the third time since the end of June. There's also news that Evergrande has notified 2 banks to suspend payment of interest on the loan due on the 21st of this month. The problem is Evergrande is not the only real estate developer that is in great trouble. The share prices of many other developers plunged too. So let me show you the bond price of Evergrande. So you can see this is the bond price of Evergrande in 1 year. You can see how deeply it had plunged since last year, this time. You know, in China, many local governments rely on selling the rights of land to survive. That's why they don't like the house price to fall too much. But on the other hand, as much as 70% of Chinese people's wealth is locked in real estate market. Another worrying side is the trading volume of houses is dropping sharply too. Let me show you an article. So this article says that the trading volume of existing housing in Shenzhen city has hit a 10-year low recently and dropped as much as 77% year on year. So, if the real estate bubble bursts, will China have its own financial tsunami like the one that happened in the US and globally in 2007 and 2008? Actually, another bigger bubble is the financial crisis of the Chinese local government. Let's see this report. So basically, this report says that among 31 provinces and cities directly under the central government, only Shanghai has a fiscal surplus in the first half of 2021. The rest city or provinces are all in deficit. Even Guangdong province, China's top province in terms of GDP figures, is not able to cover its expenses. You know, back in 2017, there are still 6 provinces and 1 city had a financial surplus. So the situation has worsened after 4 years. And in early September, the China Institute of Fiscal Studies released the Blue Book of China's fiscal policy. Let me show you. Yes, so this is the Blue Book of China's fiscal policy. This Blue Book predicts that China's fiscal shortfall will continue to widen after 2021, with the gap expanding to 10 trillion yuan in 2025. So what does 10 trillion yuan mean? Let me give you some ideas. China's general public budget revenue in 2019 was about 19 trillion yuan. And if you look at the central government revenue alone, it was close to 9 trillion yuan. Yet, by 2025, the nation's fiscal deficit will be 10 trillion. This huge hole exceeds the total central government's revenue in 2019, and this will happen in just a few years. If you were Xi Jinping, would you feel very much worried? Yes, you would. And all the big and small business owners who have any money to be taken away should also feel very much worried too. So now let's watch another short video. This video shows victims of the so-called P2P, peer-to-peer lending platforms protesting in front of a government building in Hainan province in China. This video was taken on September the 6th.
我没有抢人呐，我没有抢人呐，不能拉走啊！
我甚至会否找，好好找，
好找，
好好找，这种找。
Okay, you can see a lot of people were taken away or arrested. You know, several years ago, the P2P online lending platforms were very popular in China, with the CCP promoting them. Let me show you some data. So, public data compiled by the Chinese Epoch Times indicates that there were 1,855 known online lending platforms in China. They had 344 million participants and a pending balance of about 145 billion. But these platforms only account for 12.5% of the total number of online lending platforms. These platforms have been heavily promoted by the CCP. According to the statistics reported in the Chinese Epoch Times, from 2013 to 2015, the CCP's most influential TV station, China Central Television, reported and promoted P2P lending platform dozens of times, and state-level CCP leaders have spoken out in favor of P2P. Big cities including Beijing, Tianjin, Shenzhen, Nanjing, and Shanghai issued policies to promote the development of the internet finance industry. However, the CCP started to crack down on the P2P platforms very soon. In 2018, many P2P platforms started to voluntarily exit the market. Once the P2P platforms were closed, the victims had no way to get their money back. The government cannot be held responsible for their losses, and victims who sought to recover their losses were often cracked down by the authorities, like you just saw in that video. Today, I saw news that those victims were detained illegally for more than 24 hours. So why did the CCP promote the P2P platform and then crack down on them? It was because the numerous bad debts in CCP's state-owned banks had threatened China's financial stability. In order to solve this problem, the CCP started to promote internet financing and allowed P2P platforms to develop in order to attract funds. Bad loans were repackaged as P2P products and sold to the public who didn't know the truth. After the banks got rid of the non-performing assets, the authorities then cracked down on the P2P platforms by forcing them to close. Let's see this report. So this report says that as of middle November of last year, the actual number of P2P platforms operating across China had completely gone to zero. This means that the trillions of dollars in debts owned by the P2P platforms were also zeroed out along with them. That's why those protesters will get nothing back and will only be arrested. So this allows us to see from another angle the real situation of the Chinese economy and the financial market. As far as I know, the number of victims is huge, but as they are not organized, they can hardly do anything. So now let's move to our next topic. So I want to show you a speech by a very famous Chinese professor, someone who is regarded as a national advisor. Please make sure you read the English subtitles I added.
那我觉得就台湾挺惨的，我们会把台湾打下来，明年就动手打下来。军事上我们没有问题，我们现在已经可以打了，知道吧？今天就可以打，军事上没有问题。现在，这个就以我们现在这个
是美国正儿八经的去护着台湾的话，那就不是跟台湾打的问题。
不是，今天我讲动手，因为对台作战从来就是不以台军为主，从来以美军为主，这个准备我们已经完成了。这个
会冲突到什么？咱们应该有一条线不能冲过去。
那看美国的反应啊，我们会就是让美国别介入啊。如果美国介入，那我们就反击了。反击的结果可能美国会军事失败的。这么告诉大家，我们大概就是很短的时间，可能几个小时，美军在东亚地区所有的军事基地都会被我们摧毁，就几个小时。就他70年投的钱都废掉了，包括在日本，他已经没有能力了，是吧？就是我们用导弹对轰，他肯定是输掉的。我们导弹非常厉害，中国导弹绝对世界第一。而且11啊，就是过几个月会给大家看东风17吧，就是16上面加一个超音速弹头，20倍音速的。这个一部署，就是东亚地区美国所有的军事基地，就是几分钟就没有用了 ，dysfunction， 就是它没有用啊，就是你的雷达呀、你的指挥中心啊、你的弹药库啊、你的机库啊、你的跑道啊，全给你摧毁了。然后航母来也没有意义，是吧？航母来就给你打掉，这实际上已经美国就进攻我们能力是没有，知道吧？那我们要进攻台湾像玩似的啊，先消灭台湾20万军队一点问题都没有。只不过就是什么呢？它就是有历史代价、道德代价，知道吧？啊，它就是20世纪了，你还打那么多人，对不对？台军我跟你说20万人呐，在我军面前就是一堆肉，它是没有意义的。这一点呢，美国、台湾都低估了，包括我们国内知识界都低估了。
I don't know what you think after watching his speech. You might think, oh, sorry, I need to close this. You might think, oh, what an idiot. There is no way the CCP can win the war with Taiwan and the US. The US will intercept all the CCP's missiles and they won't be able to destroy anything or kill any of the 200,000 Taiwan troops. Well, what I want to show to everyone are the following 2 points. Apart from being a professor, this guy Jin Chanrong is also the party secretary of China, of the China Society for Future Studies. So his mentality is the CCP's mentality. I think if everyone makes the same kind of statement in the US and openly talks about killing 200,000 people as if they were only a pile of meat, he or she may be treated as a terrorist. Such kind of statements may be blocked as anti-humanity or hate speech. But this guy is invited to many very prestigious places to give speeches, and such statements are applauded in CCP's China. And he earned both big money and reputation for spreading this kind of speeches. So this is what we should pay attention to with this kind of mentality. Is there anything that they will not do? The second point is, although we might think that his speech is nonsense, but inside China, where people are blocked from seeing any other information and are only exposed to this kind of nonsense, as time goes by, many people, perhaps including CCP leaders and military leaders in this matter, may start believing in what he says too. People say that Xi Jinping often makes misjudgments when dealing with international issues. Why did he make misjudgments? He himself is also a victim of this kind of propaganda and nonsense. After a lie is repeated 1,000 times, the person who creates the lie may also start believing it. That is why we should worry. With this, let's move on to our last topic today. So why has the US won all the wars but lost all the battles? This weekend will be the 20th anniversary of 9/11. 9/11 is America's saddest memory in the 21st century. So the war on Afghanistan was actually the will of the entire US population. It is beyond doubt that the US Army is the strongest in the world. Soon after the US started the war, the Taliban regime, which was protecting Osama bin Laden collapsed fairly quickly. It seems that the US has won the war. Then it took the US 10 years to eliminate bin Laden and another 10 years to withdraw. But how has this withdrawal gone so far? Needless to say, it was a disgrace for the US. And this is not the first time for the US. Apart from the victory in the World War II, the same thing happened to the US in almost all the wars it fought afterwards. For example, the US won World War together. The US won World War II together with the then legitimate Chinese government led by Kuomintang, but it abandoned this ally and let the CCP occupy China with the support of the Soviet Union. And after that, in almost all critical historic times, the US made the wrong decision. For example, after the CCP leader Mao Zedong started the Cultural Revolution, US President Nixon established diplomatic relations with the CCP's China, bringing it into the United Nations and abandoning Taiwan. After the Tiananmen massacre in 1989, US President Bush quietly sent people to China to help the CCP through the crisis. 2 years later, with the help of US President Clinton, the CCP was allowed to join the WTO. The same is true with the Korean War and Vietnam War. The US got involved to stop the communists, but ended up not finishing the task. The horrible Kim family regime is still ruling North Korea, and Vietnam is still occupied by communists. Also, the US has been hit hard by the CCP virus pandemic. After the outbreak, the US suddenly found that medical supplies were in short supply, as everything was made in China, and so many other countries had to beg the CCP to get some basic supplies too. So what's wrong with the US? Why did such a powerful country always mishandle major international affairs in the past decades? I talked about the article, The Longer Telegram Toward a New American-China Policy last time. Let me show you that article again. So this is the article I talked about. The main point of this article is that the US should aim at getting rid of Xi Jinping instead of overturning the CCP, so that the relationship between the US and China can go back to the pre-Xi era, etc. So I think the fundamental problem of this kind of thinking is that it regards the CCP as a bad neighbor who is temporarily making some mistakes. It never tries to understand the true nature of the CCP. That is why the US repeatedly made mistakes, because it failed to see through the CCP. It never dared to think about how to deal with the issue from the root. On the contrary, it always thought it could coexist with the CCP. Several days ago, former Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating published an article. Let me show you that article. So this is that article titled, The Morris Government is Provoking China to Please America. His main points are, first, Australia is fighting the CCP because Australia wants to please the US. Second, the CCP poses no global threat. And third, it is only the US that cannot tolerate a strong CCP, etc. And I felt so sad when I read this article. The fact that a former Prime Minister of Australia, a major diplomatic country, is defending the CCP itself is a piece of strong evidence of the CCP's great threat to the world, isn't it? I'm not sure how far away the US can go on this wrong path when dealing with the CCP. The other day, when I retweeted someone's article in Chinese, I made such a statement. If the US doesn't eliminate the CCP will destroy mankind, period. Well, that's my conclusion. Spread it if you agree. Please also make sure you subscribe to and share my channel, like my videos, and leave me a comment to show your support. This is the first time that I'm using this new software to record this video. Please do forgive me if the overall result is not perfect. I will definitely do better in the future. Thank you. See you next time.